I never expected to be humiliated at my husband's will reading. It was August 7th, Clarksville. Hot, still air clinging to the windows of the law office. I sat beside the executor, Mr. Cole, my hands folded, heart pounding, and then a woman I'd never seen stood up from the back row. "I'm Annabelle Marsh," she said. "Tom's daughter. He promised me the farm." The room went silent. I blinked, stunned, waiting for someone to laugh. No one did. She held up a folded piece of paper. "He wrote me this letter. It's notarized." Mr. Cole hesitated, visibly rattled, then reached for his briefcase and pulled out a second file. "It's part of a separate legacy trust. He didn't disclose it in the main estate documents." I felt the floor tilt. I had been married to Tom for 41 years. I knew every drawer in our house. Or so I thought. The farm had always been off limits. "Promise me you'll never go there," Tom said from his hospital bed. His last words. I thought it was about grief, about memory, not secrets. But here was this woman, young, polished, unreadable, laying claim to the land like she'd been waiting for her cue. When the room emptied out, Mr. Cole handed me an envelope. Inside, a single silver key. He cleared his throat. "Tom left instructions. The farm is technically in your name now, per the trust structure. But what?" I asked. "There's something strange in the filing. He created the trust and then started paperwork to undo it. But it was never completed." I nodded without understanding, took the key, drove home in silence. I wasn't going to visit the farm, not at first. But the next morning, curiosity pulled harder than grief. I drove out to 89 Grist Hollow Road, the place he swore I should never see. When I turned the key in the front door, it stuck. Then it gave way. And inside, neatly stacked on the kitchen table, in full view, were 3 boxes labeled with my name. Not Anna's, mine. The next morning, I woke in the house Tom and I built when we still thought forever meant something simple. The mattress sagged in the center without his weight. The hall was quiet in a way that didn't feel restful. His shirt still hung in the closet, pressed and lined by season. Flannel, cotton, linen. I hadn't moved a single one. Downstairs, the kettle sputtered and clicked. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at the calendar tacked near the fridge. One square was marked in Tom's neat mechanical script, farm rent due July 15th. But July had come and gone, and I hadn't seen any deposits. I pulled the folder of household finances from the drawer where I kept our utilities and bank statements. No rent payment in July, or June, or ever. Not a cent from Grist Hollow. So who'd been paying the taxes? The upkeep? The insurance? I checked our joint checking account, the one Tom had used for years. There was no trace of activity tied to the farm. Not even a line item for land management. Just grocery runs, prescriptions, car maintenance, and funeral deposits now. My phone buzzed. "Doris, just checking in. Want me to bring over cornbread?" Doris lives 3 houses down, the kind of neighbor who still leaves casseroles on doorsteps and waters your porch ferns without being asked. I stared at the message a moment before replying. Not yet, but could use a second pair of eyes soon. Farm stuff. I set the phone down and walked into the living room. The photo wall still held our wedding picture. Tom in his uniform, me in ivory satin. Above it, a shelf with souvenirs from road trips we took back when the world felt wide and full of time. I stood there for a long while, noticing for the first time how many of the framed photos included everything but Grist Hollow. Birthdays, anniversaries, vacations, even Tom's fishing trips, but never the farm. It was a blank spot in our marriage, a place he'd sealed off like it didn't belong to us. Now I realized it never had. I poured my coffee and sat at the table where I'd once planned retirement trips and grandbaby rooms. Now it held a single manila folder and an unpaid question. If the farm hadn't been ours, then what had we really built? And why had he spent so long keeping me out of it? By evening, I pulled the old blue ledger from the dining room hutch, the one I'd kept for decades, long before we digitized our bills, The cover was cracked, ink stained in the corners. But every page inside was a record of what I gave, what we owed, what we survived. Tom used to call it Eleanor's little math book, teasing but grateful. He always said I had a better memory than any accountant. And it's true. I did the books, paid the taxes, handled the debts we didn't talk about in public. I even covered his brother's medical bills in '97 without asking for a thank you. Tonight, I wasn't looking for numbers. I was looking for proof. I flipped through year after year, mortgage payments I covered from my teaching salary when Tom was between contracts, repairs I paid for with my retirement buyout, groceries for two on a widow's pension. I totaled the medical premiums, the family loans, the emergencies, the quiet ways a woman holds a house together when no one's watching. $92,000. That's what I'd paid, tracked, or forgiven over the years. And that didn't count the labor, cleaning, caregiving, stretching meals to cover unexpected guests. Not once had I asked for anything in writing. I was his wife. That used to mean something. But now, standing in a house that still smelled faintly of his aftershave and lemon oil, I realized he had a second ledger, one I was never shown. The last page of my book had a note in the margin, written last spring. Trust check bounced. Ask Tom? I stared at it, stunned. I didn't remember writing that. I turned the page. Blank. That's where I'd stopped. I picked up the phone and called Glenda. She was my friend of 40 years and a retired accountant from Atlanta. The kind of woman who could read a spreadsheet like scripture. Do you have time to come by tomorrow? I asked. She didn't even ask why. I'll bring my laptop. We both knew what this was. It wasn't about grief anymore. It was about accounting. Of money, of memory, of what I had invested in a life that may have never been mine in full. If Tom had been keeping secrets, I was done keeping his order. Glenda arrived just after 9 a.m., balancing a laptop case in one hand and a paper bag in the other. Brought muffins, she said. You're going to need sugar for this. We cleared the dining table, set the ledger between us, and opened the folders. I showed her the calendar entry. The ledger note. The farm trust name. Grist Hollow Legacy Trust. Doesn't sound like a casual arrangement, she muttered, typing. I watched her brow furrow as she pulled up property records. Got something, she said. Transferred into the trust in 2005. Owner listed as Thomas E. Marsh, trustee. No sign of revocation. I leaned in. Any recent filings? She clicked, scrolled. Yeah, last month, July 11th. New tax address submitted. Annabelle Marsh. And look at this. Taxes paid through an LLC out of Macon. I felt the floor drop beneath me. She's already taken possession. Or she's pretending to, Glenda said. Either way, that's fraud or premature. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys. Grist Hollow Road was still shaded and quiet when I arrived mid-morning, trees arching like ribs over the long drive. But when I pulled up to the farmhouse, I slammed the brakes. The old rusted mailbox was gone. In its place, a new black post box with glossy gold letters, A. Marsh, and the lock on the gate changed. No key on my ring fit. The place looked swept, trimmed, lived in, curtains in the front window I hadn't seen in years, the porch swing polished. Someone had moved in. I stepped out of the car and walked to the gate. Taped to the side was a plain envelope, weatherproofed in a plastic sleeve, addressed to Occupant 89, Grist Hollow Road. Inside, a county tax envelope, property tax invoice, paid, date processed, July 15th. I walked the perimeter of the gate, trying to see through the trees. I wasn't trespassing, not yet, but I was close. Something flickered near the side of the house, movement behind glass, a shape. I backed away, my heart drumming steady now. This wasn't just about a surprise heir or a notarized letter. This was occupation, and whoever had taken the land had done so with certainty. I got back in the car and called the Habersham County clerk. Ma'am? The voice on the line said after searching. That name change came in last month. I remember it. She brought the paperwork herself. Annabelle Marsh hadn't just inherited the farm. She'd claimed it. And I was starting to believe she'd been planning this for a very long time. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in Tom's old office, what used to be the guest room, until he needed more space for paperwork. I hadn't touched the files since the funeral. But now, with Glenda's help, I started from scratch. The bottom drawer held what we needed, a green folder labeled Farm Lease Rent in Tom's blocky handwriting. Inside were 10 years of carbon copies, all formatted the same: monthly rent, $600 tenant, blank received, check marks, all hand-drawn, no signatures, no bank slips, no routing info. Looks manufactured, Glenda said, flipping through the pages. He was creating the illusion of tenancy. And not even very well, I muttered. No deposits match. Glenda opened her laptop again and typed quietly while I stared at a photo on the desk. It was from our 25th anniversary. Tom in his good blazer, me in pearls. A day we'd driven to the coast just to sit and watch the ocean. We'd toasted with cider. He'd kissed my hand. I remembered that man. But I didn't know the one who forged records in his own home. Glenda spoke up. "You're going to want to see this." She turned the screen toward me. It was Annabelle, smiling on the farmhouse porch, arms outstretched like she was presenting a prize. The caption read, "He left it all to me. Finally free." Posted publicly on her Facebook page. Time-stamped August 9th, 7:46 p.m., barely 36 hours after the will reading. I stared at the image. The same porch swing I'd helped paint in, 94. The same steps where Tom once sat cradling our aging Labrador, whispering, "Goodbye." Now she stood there like it was hers, as if no one had ever come before her. "She's not being discreet," Glenda said. "No," I agreed, "because she thinks I can't touch her." I turned the folder over, emptying the rest of the papers onto the desk. At the very bottom was one note in Tom's handwriting. "Hold off on 2023 filing. Waiting on confirmation." Confirmation of what? And from who? Glenda looked up. "You ready for the next layer?" I nodded. "Bank records. If she's been paid, or paying, there's a route." I took a breath and closed the folder. This wasn't confusion or error. It was orchestration. She hadn't just inherited the farm. She'd rehearsed it. And if Tom helped her build this performance, then I was going to dismantle it, line by line. The next morning, I walked into People's Bank right as the doors opened. I had brushed my hair, put on Tom's favorite gray sweater of mine, and brought every document I could think of. Marriage certificate, Tom's death certificate, our joint account information, and a typed request for records relating to the farm trust. The teller, young, kind, smiled politely as I handed everything over. She scanned the first page, then tapped a few keys. Her smile faded, replaced by professional caution. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Marsh," she said. "That trust is not under your name or authorization. Access is restricted to the named beneficiary." I leaned in. "The trust holds our family land. My husband's name is on it." She nodded sympathetically. "It was reassigned shortly before his death. I can't disclose further details unless you're the listed beneficiary." My heart thudded. "And who is listed?" She hesitated, then checked a side screen. Her voice softened. "Annabelle Marsh. It was updated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks before he died." I said. She glanced around, lowering her voice further. "The transfer came through an offshore LLC. That's unusual, but the funds looked clean." "Funds?" I asked. She tapped, then stopped herself. "I shouldn't." "Please," I said. "I'm not here to make trouble. I just buried my husband. I need to understand what he did." She looked me in the eye. A transfer of $38,000 was made into her account, July 18th, from a Cayman-registered entity linked to the trust. I stood there, stunned. That was more than we'd ever given to any family member. It was more than we had liquid. That kind of money had to come from a deliberate account, one he never told me about. I nodded, thanked her, and walked back into the hot morning. Outside, I stood still on the sidewalk as cars passed. 3 weeks before he died, Tom transferred nearly $40,000 to a woman I didn't know existed, using a trust I wasn't allowed to access, through a bank that bore our names for 40 years. Back home, I opened our joint account again. Nothing unusual there. Our balance was shrinking, not growing. That money had come from somewhere else. Anna's name wasn't just on the mailbox. It was on the accounts, the paperwork, the signature lines. And in town, the rumors had already started. Doris called after lunch. "Ran into Rachel from church," she said quietly. "Anna told her you were just Tom's wife, that the land was never yours to begin with. The past was being rewritten in real time, and I was disappearing from the story." I drove back to the farm that evening, not to trespass. Not yet, just to look. The air had turned golden, the kind of North Georgia dusk that makes even broken things look holy. But the gate in front of me had never felt more final. It was still locked. The new chain was shiny, and the keypad glinted in the fading light. Anna had replaced it all. Gate, mailbox, nameplate. Every piece that once held our family's touch was scrubbed clean. I stood outside the fence line, gravel crunching beneath my shoes. Then I heard it, a voice behind me. "You must be Eleanor." She stood near the fence post, 20 feet away, arms crossed loosely, like we were neighbors meeting by chance. I hadn't heard her approach. "I thought you'd come," Anna said. Her tone was light, familiar almost. "He said you would." She walked forward slowly, as if we were old acquaintances. "I don't want this to be harder than it has to be." I didn't speak. "He called me the daughter he should have had," she said, not cruelly, just stating it. "He told me this land was poisoned by memory, that you didn't understand what it meant to him." I flinched, but I didn't let her see it. "I have the letter if you'd like to see it again," she offered. "It's valid, witnessed, notarized, and the trust was filed properly." "I've seen it," I said. "I was there." She tilted her head. "Then you understand. He made a choice." I looked at her, young, smooth-skinned, with a voice that softened every sharp edge. She had that gift Tom admired, calm control. His poker face, passed down or imitated. "You didn't know him," I said finally. She blinked. "Did you?" That stung more than I expected. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't boast. She didn't even ask me to leave. She didn't need to. The boundary had already been drawn. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a presentation. She turned and walked back toward the house, her sandals quiet on the gravel. The porch light flicked on as she stepped inside. No shouting, no threats. Just the clear, cold outline of exclusion. I stood at the gate a minute longer, then walked back to my car. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. But as I drove away, one question repeated in my head, over and over. If he called her the daughter he should have had, then what was I? And what was the last 41 years of my life really built on? I didn't know yet, but I was done waiting for someone else to tell me. That night, I climbed the attic steps for the first time in years. It wasn't planned. I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, and every creak of the floorboards felt like a memory trying to surface. I found myself standing under the pull string in the hallway, staring up at the square of shadow overhead. Tom's cedar chest was up there. Locked, heavy, always kept near the far wall beneath the slant of the roofline. He used to say it was full of old tax records and war memorabilia, things better left alone. But tonight, that didn't sound like caution. It sounded like evasion. I pulled down the ladder and climbed up. The attic smelled of dust and pine. My flashlight beam swept across holiday boxes, a broken fan, a rolled rug, and then, in the far corner, the chest. The lock had rusted through. It crumbled in my hand. Inside, I found an old flannel blanket folded neatly on top. Beneath it, 3 shoeboxes, a canvas satchel, and a labeled cassette tape. Anna, 1978. My fingers went cold. She would have been a baby. Tom and I had only been married 4 years then. We were living in Athens. No children, no explanations. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor and opened the satchel. Letters, dozens, most addressed to Thomas E. Marsh, sent from Atlanta, Augusta, Macon, some postmarked from as early as 1977, some signed Clarisse. One envelope was unsealed. Inside, a single page. I've enclosed her birth certificate. I won't contact you again. I stared at it for a long time. The name, Annabelle Connor, born May 28, 1978. Father, Thomas E. Marsh. My ears buzzed. Beneath the letters was a manila envelope marked in Tom's handwriting, unfiled revocation. It was dated August 2024, 9 months ago. Inside, a trust revocation statement, clearly drafted, clearly signed, not filed, not witnessed. I felt everything tighten in my chest. Tom had started to undo it. He'd planned to revoke the trust, to stop her. But he never finished, or he never got the chance. I picked up the cassette, ran my thumb over the label. I hadn't owned a player in years, but Doris did. I could use hers tomorrow. I sat there another hour, surrounded by the smell of old wood and colder truths. Anna was real. Not a con, not a coincidence. But Tom had changed his mind, and now the only question was, why didn't he finish the job? And who, if anyone, had made sure he couldn't? I called Glenda and William Baines before the sun came up. William had been a local attorney for 30 years before he retired. He handled our closing documents when Tom and I bought this house in '89. He wasn't flashy, but he was thorough, and most importantly, quiet. By mid-morning, we were seated at the wide oak table in his home office. The revocation papers were spread between us. Glenda had printed out the trust documents and traced the LLC transfers as far as she could without a subpoena. I placed the cassette in the center of the table like it was dynamite. William put on his glasses and read the revocation twice. "It's valid," he said slowly. "Or it would have been. The problem is it's unsigned by a witness and never filed. So legally, it's a ghost. But we have proof he was trying to undo it," I said. He nodded, "which is enough for an injunction, if we move fast." He drafted the motion himself. Emergency petition to enjoin unauthorized transfer of property under disputed trust. Glenda handled the supporting documents. Timeline, financial discrepancies, copies of the legacy trust, and the letter from Anna. And at the heart of it, the revocation Tom never sent. By 3 p.m., William stood before the probate judge with a full binder in hand. He didn't ask for sympathy, just time. We got it. The court issued a temporary freeze on all Grist Hollow Trust assets. Title transfers, tax filings, utility hookups, paused. Anna couldn't legally claim anything more than her Facebook post allowed. The order hit the county clerk's desk before closing. I made sure of it. Back in William's office, I exhaled for the first time all day. It wasn't victory, but it was delay. Anna wouldn't know yet, not unless she tried to file something new. Glenda looked at me over the rim of her coffee. "We bought time, Elle. That's all. This isn't over." I nodded. "Then let's use it." William leaned forward. "We'll need to prove intent. Not just that he changed his mind, but that he acted to reverse it." "I have more," I said. "Letters, a birth certificate, and this." I placed the cassette in his hand. His eyes narrowed. "If that voice says what you think it does, then she won't just lose the farm," I said. "She'll lose the lie. And this time, it would be documented. Legal, final, no gate, no trust. No charm would protect her from the truth sealed in Tom's own voice. We'd frozen the money. Now we were going to melt the mask. The library's media lab smelled like dust and hot plastic. I hadn't stepped inside since my teaching days. But Ray, the tech archivist, still remembered me. She wore her gray hair in a thick braid and spoke with the calm of someone who fixed what others threw away. When I handed her the cassette, she raised an eyebrow. "You know this could snap?" "It already has," I said. "I just need to know what's on it." She guided me to a digitizer in the corner, clunky, industrial, beautiful in its purpose. As it whirred to life, she slipped on headphones, adjusted the dials, and listened. 30 seconds in, she froze. Then she handed the headphones to me. I heard Tom's voice. Clear, measured. Not young, not frail. Somewhere in between. Probably recorded in the last year of his life. "If you're hearing this," he began, "it means I didn't finish what I started. I tried, but I couldn't undo everything in time." There was a pause, the sound of him breathing. Then, "Anna was born from something I did wrong. I gave money, set up the trust, thought it was enough. But she found me later, said she wanted the land. I told her she couldn't have it. Not anymore. I revoked the trust. It's in the envelope. Eleanor is the only rightful heir. She's the one I trust." I stood there with tears stinging my eyes, not because I forgave him, but because the man I buried had, at least once, tried to do something right. Ray didn't speak. She just nodded once, then went to work. By mid-afternoon, she digitized the full recording, clipped the key audio, and attached a digital notarization timestamp from the library's chain of custody protocol. "We can authenticate the recording's creation date through system logs," she said. "It won't win a trial on its own, but paired with that revocation form, it'll turn heads." I left with a flash drive, a printout of the transcript, and the original tape sealed in an archival sleeve. Outside, I paused in the parking lot and looked out at the ridge just beyond the town square. You could almost see the edge of the farm from here if you knew which way to squint. Anna had the paperwork, but now I had Tom's voice, and next I was going to use it to speak where he no longer could. Not in whispers, not behind gates, but in court, out loud, in public. And I wasn't going alone. We turned the dining room into a command center. Gone were the placemats and candles. In their place, color-coded folders, county maps, bank records, and a corkboard pinned with thread, like something from a courtroom drama. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Glenda was here daily now, sleeves rolled, mind sharp. William brought over court forms and legal pads. Doris came with sandwiches, sweet tea, and information. "She's been saying things," Doris reported, taking her usual chair by the window. "Anna, around town, at the salon, the feed store, even after service on Sunday." I paused. "What kind of things?" "That you've been hiding money, that this whole trust thing is a diversion. She's painting herself as the one Tom really wanted to carry on his legacy." I looked at Glenda. "We knew this was coming." Glenda tapped her pen. "It's time to respond, just enough to shift the tide." That's when I called Janelle Dent, a reporter I trusted from my time on the local school board. Fair, principled, thoughtful. She knew how to handle sensitive stories. She came that evening, notebook ready. We showed her everything. The ledger, the unsigned but dated revocation, the forged rent receipts, and most importantly, the digital audio of Tom's voice. She listened without interruption. Then she looked up and said quietly, "This isn't about land. It's about being erased." "Yes," I said, "exactly that." She asked for photos, Tom's handwriting, the sealed cassette, the tax documents with Anna's LLC. We gave them. She promised the article would stick to facts. No unnecessary speculation. Glenda handed William a printed copy of our timeline. "You've got dates, transfers, signatures. This isn't just suspicion, it's structure." And she was right. We weren't guessing anymore. We were proving. Anna had made her move through quiet filings and public smiles, but we were building something stronger. Evidence, sequence, truth. And we weren't alone. Not anymore. Doris had already spoken to Pastor McKay, who'd said without hesitation, "I'll stand with her, if it comes to that." It was coming to that. I stood in my own home, surrounded by people who refused to let my story be rewritten. The documents were ready. The voices were gathered. The next step wouldn't be quiet. It would be a courtroom. And this time, there would be witnesses. The summons was served the morning of August 16th. William filed it personally at the courthouse just after breakfast. The complaint was clear: fraudulent claim of property, improper use of trust funds, attempted title misappropriation. Anna had 21 days to respond. But she didn't wait. By mid-afternoon, William received an email from a law office in Atlanta, one I didn't recognize. Subject line, settlement proposal, Anna Bell Marsh estate claim. Inside was a message: carefully worded and overly polite. Anna was willing to resolve the dispute amicably. She proposed a cash settlement of $60,000 in exchange for full withdrawal of Eleanor Marsh's claim to the Grist Hollow Trust and Estate. Glenda read it out loud, her voice tight. "She's trying to pay you off. She thinks I'll go away for 60 grand, I said quietly. William scrolled to the bottom. "She wants your signature. And confidentiality." I shook my head. "Absolutely not." "Good," he said, folding the printout. "We'll respond on the record." Offer declined. Glenda opened a new file and began logging the email as part of the case exhibits. "We're adding this to the timeline. It shows she knows her position is shaky. She wouldn't offer that money if she believed her story," I said. "She's protecting something." "Or someone," Doris added from her seat by the window. I thought again about the offshore transfer, the tax filings under the LLC, and the swift move-in just after Tom passed. It wasn't just greed. It was precision. This wasn't a grab. It was a plan. William filed the formal response to Anna's offer that evening. 2 lines, no emotion. Settlement declined. Full claim retained. All further communication via legal channels. And that was that. No more backdoors. No more polite requests. We were moving forward, publicly, formally, and with the full weight of the law behind us. That night, I sat alone in the living room with the cassette tape on the coffee table in front of me. I didn't play it. I didn't need to. I remembered his voice now. And I remembered what he said. "Eleanor is the only rightful heir. She's the one I trust." That had been buried too long. Now it was going to be heard, in a place where every word would be recorded, and where silence, finally, wouldn't protect anyone. That Sunday, I went to church like I always did. I sat in my usual pew, third from the front, left side, wearing a navy blouse Tom always liked. I didn't want to draw attention. I just needed calm. The sermon was on perseverance. Pastor McKay's voice was steady, kind. I barely heard the words, but I felt their weight all the same. After the final hymn, I slipped out the side aisle, hoping to avoid conversation. But as I turned the corner into the church hall, she was waiting. Anna. She stood near the bulletin board, smiling faintly, holding a coffee cup she hadn't touched. "Eleanor," she said. I stopped. "Let's not make this uglier than it has to be," she said softly. "People don't need to see us like this." "We are like this," I replied. "I didn't create the division." "You're dragging a private matter into public view," she said, still calm. "Is that really what Tom would have wanted?" I felt something tighten behind my ribs. He didn't want lies carried in his name. And you know it. She glanced around, quick, nervous. "You're grieving. I understand. But if you keep pushing, I'll have no choice but to protect what's mine, fully. Is that a threat?" "It's a warning," she said, gentle as ever. "You don't want to be remembered as bitter. And you don't want people digging through your finances either." That's when I realized she wasn't just trying to shake me. She was fishing for weakness, for fear. But I wasn't afraid anymore. "You should leave now," I said. Before she could speak again, a voice broke the silence. "I heard everything," said Pastor McKay. He stepped out from the hallway, bulletin in hand, his expression unreadable. Anna turned, startled. "Pastor, this is a misunderstanding." He held up a hand. "No need to explain. I'll be writing a statement." Her face changed, just for a second. The calm cracked. He looked at me. "Mrs. Marsh, you're not alone in this." Anna left without another word. Later that evening, Pastor McKay emailed William a typed account of what he'd witnessed, time-stamped, signed. Doris notarized it at the kitchen table. We added it to the file. Anna had tried intimidation, then settlement, then reputation. Now we had a witness, a man trusted by many, and a voice that could not be dismissed. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was public. It was documented. And it was headed for court. The hearing was set for August 21st. We arrived at the Habersham County Courthouse just after 9 a.m. William, Glenda, Doris, Pastor McKay and me. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. Judge Baker presided, a seasoned man with silver hair and the kind of gaze that waited out nonsense. His bench was plain, his words measured. When he said, "Let's begin," the room felt like stone settling. Anna sat at the other table, her attorney whispering in her ear. She looked polished, calm, but her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, fingers white at the knuckles. William stood. He presented the timeline first, dates of the trust, the revocation, the death, then the financial transfers, then the offshore LLC filings. Everything was clean, orderly, factual, and then, with the court clerk's permission, William approached the bench with a small speaker and one labeled flash drive. "Your Honor," he said, "we respectfully submit posthumous audio testimony, digitally notarized, chain of custody certified, and transcribed. It is the recorded voice of Thomas E. Marsh." Judge Baker adjusted his glasses. "Proceed." The room quieted. The click of the speaker echoed off the paneled walls. Then Tom's voice filled the courtroom. "If you're hearing this, it means I didn't finish what I started." His words moved slow, measured. He spoke of Anna, how she'd contacted him, how he'd set up the trust out of guilt, how he later realized the mistake. He named me directly, twice. "Eleanor is the only rightful heir. She's the one I trust." Anna's lawyer objected, something about authenticity and hearsay, but Judge Baker waved it off. "You'll have your turn. Let the record play." When it ended, the room stayed silent. Then William presented the physical tape, the transcript, the library's notarization, and the affidavit from Ray, confirming the digitization date. Next came the witness statements, Glenda on the ledgers, Doris on the tax filings, and finally, Pastor McKay, solemn in his Sunday suit, testifying to what he overheard in the church hall. Anna never looked at him. When it was her lawyer's turn, they tried deflection, questioned Tom's clarity, suggested the revocation wasn't legally binding. But they had no counter-evidence, no proof, no audio, no revocation of the revocation, only that same letter, and a story that was now full of holes. Judge Baker requested a recess. We stepped into the hall, the marble cool beneath our shoes. William leaned in. "It's going our way," I nodded, hands still. For the first time, I wasn't standing outside the gate. I was inside, speaking in my own name, and the truth, once sealed in a cassette, had finally been heard. We waited in the hallway for 22 minutes. William sat on the bench, hands folded. Glenda paced. Doris muttered quiet prayers under her breath. I just stood at the window, watching the courthouse flag shift in the breeze. Anna remained behind the door, not once crossing into the hallway. When the bailiff called us back in, the room settled into a silence that felt more final than dramatic. Judge Baker shuffled a few pages, then lifted his gaze. "This court," he began, "has reviewed the material evidence, including original trust filings, the revocation document, corroborated witness testimony, and authenticated audio evidence of the decedent's posthumous intent." His voice did not waver. "The court finds that the claimant, Annabelle Marsh, knowingly submitted a contested claim without full disclosure of relevant revocation documents and relied on outdated or voided instructions in an attempt to transfer title." Anna's lawyer shifted in his seat, but said nothing. "The trust is deemed legally revoked. Ownership of the Grist Hollow property revert solely to Mrs. Eleanor Marsh." I closed my eyes, just for a breath. Judge Baker continued, voice even. "Further, the court recognizes a deliberate attempt to mislead by omission. As such, all pending filings related to the Grist Hollow Legacy Trust are nullified. Title is hereby re-recorded in the name of Eleanor C. Marsh, widow and sole heir." He nodded once to the clerk. "Make it official." A tap of the gavel, a rustle of papers, and just like that, the courtroom shifted. Anna stood, her expression unreadable. Her lawyer touched her elbow, a signal. She turned, not toward me, but toward the door. But as she passed the gallery, a reporter's camera clicked. Outside, on the steps of the courthouse, she exploded. "I should have had it!" she shouted, voice breaking. "He told me! He promised me!" The crowd stepped back. Janelle stood nearby, recorder in hand. Not intrusive, just present. Anna's lawyer muttered something, and they walked away fast, down the stone steps, disappearing into a waiting car. I didn't move for a long time. William placed a warm hand on my shoulder. "It's done." Glenda smiled gently. "It's documented. It's real. No one can take it now." I nodded. Inside, the clerk stamped the final papers. I watched her hand press the seal, gold and raised and absolute. The deed was mine again, not because of a loophole, not because of pity, but because the truth, once spoken, had carried enough weight to reclaim what had been taken. There were no cheers, no applause, only the sound of justice, quiet, firm, permanent, and the door, finally, swinging open. By the next morning, she was gone. She didn't return to the farmhouse, didn't fight the ruling, didn't even pack properly. Her curtains were stuffed in garbage bags on the porch. A single lamp lay tipped in the driveway. No note, no goodbye. She vanished, but the consequences didn't. Within 48 hours, the LLC Anna used to funnel funds was flagged for fraud. The $38,000 transfer triggered an audit. 2 more families came forward, similar inheritance, reassignments, same offshore routes. By the end of the week, her accounts were frozen. By the end of the month, so was her reputation. Her consulting firm issued a single-line press release. Employment terminated. Her name became searchable in public court databases and in a widely shared article titled, "False Heir Exposed by Cassette Tape in Georgia Probate Court." The photo, her storming down courthouse steps, mouth open mid-scream. Her engagement? Quietly called off. She'd rewritten herself as a daughter. A legacy, a victim, but the truth had a sharper pen. And I changed the locks, repainted the door, planted rosemary under the kitchen window, and drove a stake into the red clay by the gate. A new sign. E. Marsh, keeper of this land, not heir, not wife. Keeper. I didn't need a parade. I didn't need to gloat. The ledger spoke. The tape played. The court ruled. And when people pass that gate now, they know who won. Not by deceit, but by receipt.